Well, my horror day is far from being done because I have to travel back to Derry, Maine for a little bit. Hey guys, what's going on? It's Daniel Strong from QuickTime Reactions. And yes, we are back in Derry, Maine, and we are back covering It Welcome to Derry. And this is episode 4, which is entitled, let me get this all in here, The Great Swirling Apparatus of Our Planet's Function. Gosh, that is a mouthful of a title. This episode was written by Helen Shang and was directed by the same director that did last week's episode, Andrew Bernstein. The kids now have actual physical proof that this entity in Derry does exist, but the cops, they don't quite believe them in this instance. Meanwhile, on the military base, time is running out. The cycle is just about over, and they have to try and find this thing before it goes underground. So, like I've done in the past, I'm going to chop this up into different segments. First, we're going to talk about what happens in the kid-centric plot. So, like I said in the beginning, the kids take their photos to the police station. It just doesn't work. The adult cops, don't see what the kids see, and so they're kind of up the creek without a paddle. And so they basically just have to band together and try and save each other as best they can. Will, early on in this, that is Will, correct? I think it is Will. Yeah, I think it is Will. Oh my gosh, why is it not listing in it on this episode? Yes, Will. Will, is caught by his mom, Charlotte, because Charlotte found the photos that were hiding in the drawer. And so she's asking, what's going on? Why are you disappearing all these nights? And, going out and hanging out with friends. And Will tries to explain, everything to his mom as best as he can, but, can't give everything away. And his mom's like, all right, I don't want you going out. School and back. That's it. And, trying to keep this all away from Leroy, Mr. Hanlon, trying to keep him out of this as best they can. But Leroy thinks that, Will's having him some girl problems. So they go out fishing, having a good time. But one of the reels breaks. So Leroy goes to, get some more bait. And then Will has an encounter with the entity posing as his father, burned up from a potential plane accident. And I also love that the entity says, "You'll burn too," while he's underwater, just to scare Will even more. Will has another encounter with the entity when he is looking through the telescope at his house later on, and he's looking at the street. He pans his telescope across, and he sees a figure dressed up as a clown. And he screams, alerts both his parents. Leroy goes out to try and see, what on earth is going on, but of course there's nothing there. But both times, at the creek and at the house, there's a red balloon that's there. And of course, Leroy, seeing the fear in his kid's eyes, goes to the military base to try and figure out what's going on. Now, Halloran has already had a couple of, he's had a few encounters or I wouldn't even necessarily say the entity. He's had, I wouldn't even say visions of his grandmother, because, well, he's seen his grandmother and basically says, like, don't let that thing in. Don't let it in. Um, and Leroy goes and talk with Halloran and is like, what exactly are we doing here? And Halloran's like, I don't know. And plus, if I did know, I wouldn't tell you. So, everyone's just trying to keep all the cards pressed up against their chest. Um, but we're going to talk about the two big things that happened in this episode. The first thing is Marge. She wants to try and, become friends again with Lily. And so, she's like, can we just start over and just, be friends and, start out with a clean slate? And Lily's like, I'd really like that. And of course, a couple of boys walk by, and Marge is like, well, Tim Flanagan had the eyes for you? That's pretty cool. And I also find it funny that the dude's last name is Flanagan, because Mike Flanagan is known for his Stephen King adaptations, Dr. Sleep, Life of Chuck, so on and so forth. And so Lily's like, oh, let me go and, touch myself up in the bathroom, so I look presentable for Tim. But of course, this is going to be a Mean Girls Carrie-esque trap for the patty cakes to just try and humiliate Lily in front of the whole entire school. So Marge follows her into the bathroom to try and, carry forth this plan. But it does not end up being that way, because the entity kind of sets its sights on Marge, who earlier in the episode was freaked out by some snails on the projector. And so her eyes start to bulge out of her head, much like the snails did. And she's just trying to find any way to try and, cut her eyes, essentially. She tries, I think it's a pick. I could be completely wrong about this. She grabs a pick, tries to get it done work. She then sees, oh, look at that. I think it is a bandsaw, or it could be a table saw. One of the two. I clearly didn't take a shop class when I was in high school. Didn't do that. So she goes towards this saw and is about to saw her eyes and most likely her head off when Lily stops it, and she grabs that pick trying to go after her eyes again, but Lily grabs it and stops it. But of course, everybody comes back in and sees Lily with that pick, and people are going to put two and two together, and it's going to look really, really bad. So Marge is definitely going to be on their side now, because she had her own encounter with this entity, and she's now naturally believe every single thing that they tell her. The other thing that happened, the major thing that happened, is Halloran using his shine on Daniel in the show, who is the son to Rose. And Daniel is played by Joshua Odjick. I'm so sorry about the pronunciation of your last name. But he was in Long Walk earlier this year. So Halloran uses his shine, and I love the way that this is showcased, where essentially Halloran is trying to find a memory of Daniel telling his mom the story about the Galoo, as it's talked about in the native language, about this monster in the woods that came long before everyone else did and had its roots planted in what would eventually become Derry, Maine. But then the natives came and they lived off the land for so long, but they also had encounters. They never went to the western wood because otherwise they'd go and disappear. But then the white people came in. And of course, the white people, settlers, they didn't listen. And sure enough, they all started going away. And so, the natives tried to find a way to stop this. Of course, that didn't work. And so, instead of stopping it, they contained it with 13 markers around the western wood to keep it contained in that wood. Because otherwise, it would have spread all around the world and killed everybody. So, they stopped it and they contained it mainly to where Derry is located now. But I also love this. Halloran, looking almost very much like Pennywise in this instance, is telling young Daniel, "Oh, that was a really good story. Now, why don't you tell us where those little beacons are and try and help us out a little bit?" And I love the transition of young Daniel walking up to the door. He opens it, and then it's older Daniel right by Halloran's side. Love that. And he's like, in the sewer system, you'll be able to find where those beacons are. And the light, we push towards that light, and then the light kind of fades away a little bit, and the picture becomes clear, and it's the house that we've seen not only in the intro, but also from the previous two It films as well. That old, burnt-down house that It has been known to be in, and it's like one of its bases of operation, shall we say. But yeah, that is where we leave off this episode. I really liked the exploration of how the natives dealt with this, because they were the first ones to encounter this entity and kind of stave it away for so long. And then, of course, the settlers came, and then, of course, everything happens. Really good performances throughout the cast, and it was just really, really fun learning about and expanding. Well, I wouldn't necessarily say expanding, because the lore is in the book, but for TV wise, shall we say, expanding the lore of this entity in Derry, Maine, and tying it back to all those years ago. I really like that aspect of it, and I would probably say this is my favorite episode of the season so far. But what did you guys think? Let me know down in the comments section below. But yeah, that is pretty much it for me and my review of It Welcome to Derry episode 4. Be safe, and like I've always said, don't go to Derry, Maine, because you could go missing. And I assume that you don't want to go missing, so just don't go to Derry, Maine. But, I'll end up back here next weekend, so what are you going to do? I will catch you guys next time.